Women. What was your worst run-in with a creep?
I was walking my dog and made the mistake of not rushing home once it got dark. A man in a baseball cap and oversized jacket blocked my path to comment how pretty my dog was and how I must take good care of him. I smiled, tightly, and thanked him, told him to have a good day and nodded and went to go around him. So he naturally grabbed my arm and said, "Yeah, I bet you take real good care of anything you have. You married?" I lied and said yes. He let me go but followed me home. I wound up calling my boyfriend to come pick me up.
Ugh, my dog is my security blanket on walks. He's just a timid basset hound, but my creepy encounters drop 90% when he's with me. He won't walk down my driveway now though, after this extremely tall guy got pissed when my dog wouldn't let him pet him and proceeded to charge both of us. Chased us all the way back to my block where I dodged between some houses to lose him. Now I have to drive my dog to different neighborhoods to talk him on a walk. I usually carry mace but forgot that day. I hate the poo we have to deal with. It shouldn't be a mistake not to rush home before dark. You should be able to effing walk your dog whenever, wherever. And people who haven't experienced it don't really get how scary it is in the moment, because you don't know how far it's going to go, whether it's just a creep messing with you, or you should be scared for your safety or even your life. You don't know until it's over.
The most memorable was when I was sitting in my parents' front garden, on the swing, reading. The way everything is laid out with the trees and whatnot, you can barely see the swing deck barbecue area from any perspective that's not from the front door. Very private spot. Anyway, I was just sitting there reading when I hear someone walking up. Assume it's a family member because how would it not be? Someone plops down on the swing next to me, throws an arm around me and it's just some effing guy. Says some stuff, tries to move closer and proceeds to attempt to keep me from leaving when I get up. I GTFO of there, practically sprint back to the house and tell my dad what just happened and that there's some asshole in our garden being completely gross at me. He just laughs and says, "Oh, that's just new across the street neighbor. Be nice." The F? Over the next couple years, Poohhead would go on to make me and my older, only occasionally visiting, sisters super uncomfortable any chance he got. Long stories. And his poor, but large and angry, dog was always loose in the neighborhood and murdering other people's pets. That motherfucker still makes my blood boil.
I'm so sorry. I wrote my story down below and when I told my siblings what had happened, I got a similar response, kind of disbelief, disregard that made me think I was making a big deal out of nothing. It really kept me from doing anything. I'm so sorry your dad didn't have your back either.
I was 8 years old and waiting for the bus in the morning to go to my mum's work. A guy sat next to me at the bus stop and his bus pass was the wrong color, expired. He told me he loved me and as scary as it is, I said thank you. When the bus finally came, I got on first and the bus driver lady immediately shut the door behind me. She said the man knelt down to try and look up my shorts and that he wouldn't be taking the bus with us. I told my mum and after work we went and bought me my first pepper spray. As a effing 8-year-old.
That's terrible, I'm glad the bus driver didn't let him on.
It's a tie. Outside of a string of bars a drunk man yelled, "You're my type." Then ran up, bear hugged me, picked me up and wouldn't let me go. My male friends intervened and somehow the guy fell over and took me down with him and still wouldn't let go. I was so shocked that I didn't fight back but I wish I would have. The other was a guy who followed me into my apartment building lobby and wouldn't leave. He was under the impression that he was going to be invited to my place? I got rid of him by giving him a fake phone number. I'm sorry, random person who likely received texts from the creep.
If your name is Mary, he got my number and called me around 3 a.m. every school night.
So, last year I got a flat tire on a semi-busy road right when a snowstorm started. Since I had AAA, I figured I would use one of my roadside assistants to have them replace the tire with a spare that I had, and I wouldn't have to go outside since I forgot gloves. While I was waiting, a mid-40s early 50s man came up to my window and asked if I needed help. Thinking that he was just a good Samaritan at the time, I thanked him but told him, no, I was just waiting for AAA. Now, if he left here, I would have a nice story about a guy willing to help me with a car problem. Instead, he gets downright pushy. He lives nearby. I can just take my car there and change it in his garage. Why don't I just stay in his house until AAA comes? I kept telling him no until he starts yelling, and I rolled up the window and he starts pounding on it. Eventually he left when the AAA guy came, but I still took a very long and circuitous route home.
Stay inside, lock the doors and honk the horn like *******, and they usually go away. I have worked nights all my life and the amount of men that will approach a lone woman in a car is scary.
There was a creepy hunched old man who used to come into a pub I worked at. He used to say and do slightly weird things, and then one day he called one of the glass collectors fat. She was 16 at the time, and to apologize he went to fist bump her, then grabbed her hand and put her fingers in his mouth.
The first thing that comes to mind is, never accept finger food from Creepy Charlie.
A few years ago I lived in a tiny condo right next to a few trails in San Diego. I was on a pretty strict running and hiking routine. One night it got dark faster than expected. A man who appeared to be about 6 feet 3 inches, and 200 pounds approached me as I was nearing the end of my hike. He told me, with a smirk on his face, to be careful as there are many things that could hurt me when the sun goes down. The next day as I'm exiting my back gate he's standing there as if he's waiting for me. He introduced himself and admitted he's been watching me for a while. I decided to pretend like I was grabbing something from my car and went back into my house. For the next few days I see this guy circling my condo, looking in if the curtains are open. He was always walking around day and night. I checked the Megan's Law website and surprise, there he was. Multiple charges including RP by force or fear and child pornography. I decided to contact his parole officer and he immediately returned my call, stated he could tell I fit his M.O. and to use extreme caution. He said he would do what he could to get him out of the neighborhood. After that call I thankfully never saw him again.
Excellent job finding his parole officer. I'm so sorry that happened to you.
Thank you. It was particularly easy. There was a contact button on his page.
I was 19, worked at a main library in my city, with several floors and an elevator. I was taking a book truck, the library guard got on. As soon as the door closed he cornered me and kissed me. He was at least 40 and much bigger than me. I never got on an elevator alone with him again, nor with anyone else that I didn't know.
Now I see why elevators need cameras. I hope you're doing better, RN.
It was 40 years ago, but it taught me valuable situational awareness that I still have.
When I was 13, a 50-something-year-old man said in front of my mother that if I ever misbehaved he would give me a spanking, kinda out of the blue. Then when her attention was averted he kinda snuck a hug for a few seconds too long. Nothing super crazy but hella awkward.
I had an old friendly Gramps type of neighbor tell me I was gonna be a good-looking chick one day, as he caressed my cheek and ran his thumb over my lips. In front of my mother. I was 9. My mom pulled me back, gave him a death look, then we left immediately. Good mom. And F him.
A guy saw me in the metro and thought I was cute, which meant he had to follow me on my 5 kilometers walk home to my flat in the middle of the night. He introduced himself to me as I was about to put in the key to my door.
That's crazy. Wouldn't know what to do next. Continue opening the door or just go somewhere else.
Used to work with this old man that would touch me all the time on my arm or my back. It's hard for me to make a scene, although I wish that I had been direct with him. My solution was to shuffle away from him anytime he got close to me. It did seem to fix it, but he was kind of a DK afterwards. Also same job, I was kissed on the neck by another coworker very suddenly. This guy was not from the US, so I chalked it up to cultural differences, but I did not view him the same way afterwards.
I worked at a grocery store when I was younger. One day the district manager came in. I was stocking the floor, so I was crouched down putting stuff on the shelves. All of a sudden I feel someone grab my ponytail and start playing with it. I turn around to start yelling and realize it's the DM. I was so pissed off. What makes it even weirder is even though I'd seen the guy around and knew who he was, I'd never had a conversation with or interacted with him in any way. Why the hell did he think that was an acceptable thing to do? I'll never know. He was so weird. He didn't say anything to me, he just walked away and I stood there flabbergasted that had just really happened.
When I delivered pizzas and I was 18, this guy asked me if I wanted to step in while he grabbed his money. It was cold and rainy, so I took him up on the offer. He ended up trying to keep me there till his mom got home because he didn't have enough for the pizza. He tried to force me into a pyramid scheme and kept making uncomfortable comments about me. I had left my phone in my car, so I couldn't text my manager to call me to give me an out, because no matter how hard I tried to leave, this guy would find some way to block my path. I took off when he went to the bathroom and told my manager about what happened. Females weren't allowed to deliver to him anymore. We eventually found out he was a convicted sex offender too. Normally I find an out and I always have an escape plan. But I put myself in a position where I couldn't give myself an escape. I went on to deliver pizzas for several years, but after that day I implemented a new rule, which was, never enter anyone's home unless I knew who it was. I'd stand in the pouring rain any day over entering a stranger's home. I come from a safe, low-crime area, but my gut instinct that night was that I was in danger.
I am a male, and a customer I delivered to, also a male, got pretty creepy with me. The first time I delivered to him, he invited me in to put the pizzas down while he got his cash, and everything seemed totally normal. The second time I delivered food to him, he wasn't answering the door. I called the number on the slip, and finally he came saying that he had fallen asleep cause he took Benadryl after getting bit by a spider, but he was really just trying to get my phone number on caller ID. I didn't go in that time, cause I had another order to deliver, but as I was walking back to my car, he asked if I could get him a pack of cigarettes. At some point on my travels he'd tip me another $10. That never happened. Then he called the store at the end of my shift and asked if I left a watch at his house. Then he'd call my phone with his number blocked, say something like, "Hey, wanna F?" Hang up, then call with his number unblocked so my caller ID would get it, but he'd hang up once I answered. He did that a few times in the same day, so I called the cops, but finally called him back and told time to stop. I don't think he ever ordered food from our restaurant again.
Even if he did order food, he should have been on the delivery ban list, if you guys had one. I only worked at one place that would never say no. I had someone chuck a handful of change at me from the second floor when I was in the entryway, so I turned around and knocked right out of there. My boss was pissed I didn't make the delivery, meaning picking up all that change and counting it after they pelted me with like $15 worth of small change. Every other place we've had a "you were a douche and lost delivery privileges" list.
14 years old and alone on the subway. Man sits in a seat across from me, spreads his legs and starts masturbating through his pants while staring me straight in the eyes. I was getting ready to jump up and run out at the next stop. An older gentleman suddenly appeared, stood directly in front of me like a shield and stared the guy down. At the next stop he pointed to the door and made him get off. I hope I said thank you, but I was in shock. So thank you, dear man who protected me and made me feel safe.
What a nice man.
I smiled at a guy the first passed in the park, as I do everyone I pass. He immediately turned around and followed me, but not before he began masturbating with his entire DK and balls out of his shorts.
What kind of god-awful world do we live in if even a smile becomes a reason to assault someone?
I actually spent a lot of time trying to figure out why that was enough to entice him. But ultimately I think that is his kink and he was prepared to do that anyway. I just happened to be the first person to engage. Still effed up, but trying to understand helps me deal.
Guy used to come into the comic book store where I worked, and he had a crush on me. I tried to send clear signals I wasn't interested, and several other people told him I wasn't interested. He would always tickle my waist, so I established a no-touching rule. He respected the rule, but gave me a hard time about why it only applied to him. Answer: nobody else was groping me. If you don't grope me, you're allowed to touch my shoulder or shake my damn hand. He ended up asking me out 3 times, and I turned him down 3 times. He then started walking and punching his fist into his palm and saying things like, "All women deserve to be punished," several times. He also lied to everybody else he knew who went to the store, a lot of people. He was a gamer there, telling them I was really vain and I thought he was interested in me, but actually I was the one who was misreading the situation. Creep.
Typical incel harassment. Also retribution for being turned down. It's too bad you didn't have the power to just ban him. That kind of behavior is what leads to an unsafe workplace. You should not have had to put up with it. Especially when he started saying that all women deserve to be punished. Pooh. That's some textbook talk before someone gets assaulted. Pooh.
You know what's sad? I'm ashamed to admit it. My boss gave me the option of banning him because he noticed the change in the creep's behavior when the creep started getting more violent, sulky, and I declined. I felt bad for the guy, like society trained me to be. I was also scared about retribution. The gaming community this guy was part of was very happy to believe and spread lies about me, and treat me like poo as a result of these rumors. This guy was deaf, a potential incel. He told me a story about this poor friend of his who was falsely accused of RP, and when I asked him for details he explained that his friend had sex with a woman who passed out at the friend's house, which was obviously consensual. Can you see why I didn't want to date him?
Was walking down the sidewalk and a guy whistled at me from his car. I ignored him and kept waking. He revved his engine loudly and ran his car up on the sidewalk, missing me by a couple of feet. I was 12.
Geez, that's messed up. Especially to a 12-year-old.
Weird Larry lived in my dorm. He unsuccessfully hit on all the girls, which is why he was Weird Larry. It totally ruined his self-esteem. One night, Larry just showed up and invited himself into my room. I was not fully clothed. He took this as an invitation and climbed up into my bunk bed. I asked him to get down, and he asked me to come up there with him so we could have sex. When I refused, he took some quarters out of his pocket, put them on my nightstand and said, "What if I paid you? You could do your laundry." I told him that wasn't enough change to do a full load of laundry, and he started crying and getting snot all over my pillow. I had to go wake up the road person in charge of the dorm, and have him escorted out. Then he wouldn't stop sending me messages. They became more desperate, until they became threats at RP. I saved the messages and used them to file a restraining order. A few other girls wanted in on it, so Weird Larry was evicted from his own dormitory and had to drop out of school. **TLDR came into my dorm room uninvited, then gave me some quarters and told me he was paying me for sex. Then he cried when I said no. Wound up needing a restraining order, ***.
Greater than when I refused, he took some quarters out of his pocket, put them on my nightstand and said, "What if I paid you? You could do your laundry." Greater than I told him that wasn't enough change to do a full load of laundry, and he started crying and getting snot all over my pillow. Glossing over, for the moment, the sheer disrespect of offering you money in that situation. How much does this guy think prostitutes cost? Did he really think he was gonna get anywhere with quarters? Made eye contact with a guy across the street. Smiled at him to be polite. He followed me home without me realizing it and spent the next few days stalking me, following me when I left the house, leaving notes in my front door, etc. Had to get the cops involved.
Kinda makes me look back at all the girls in college walking with their head down all the time. If I was in a good mood I'd give whoever I passed a friendly smile, but I noticed any girl I passed would never even make eye contact. I tried not to take it personally, but every time I could only help but think, what's wrong with me? Am I ugly or something? Stories like this clear it up. All it takes is a smile? Really? F that.
A guy who stays regularly at the hotel I work in. All the female staff know to avoid getting caught alone with him. He has a habit of asking us if we know of any adult fun nearby. If you just act like you don't know what he's talking about, he'll say he wants to go to brothels and have a good time without his wife. He'll then progress to offering you various amounts of money for the night and asking you what you like in bed and what you'd be willing to do. He developed such an obsession with one of our staff before she left that security would walk round with her when he stayed because he'd followed her out to her car at one point making suggestive comments. Got stuck alone with him once as I was behind the counter and he stood blocking the only way out from behind it. He started the usual chat and I told him I wasn't interested. He then moved on to asking me what time I finished, if I lived nearby, if I walked home alone. My male coworker turned up then, but he creeped on me from a distance the rest of the day and watched me leave. I have no doubt he will assault someone one day. Hotel won't ban him because he regularly spends money.
The fact that they won't kick him out is irritating.
Very much so. They don't even tell us he's coming. We find out when we turn around and he's stood there watching us with his creepy grin. When I was 16, I went to Walmart with some of my siblings. I broke off to go look in the shoe section for some sandals, and as I turned a corner I almost ran into this guy. Very nondescript, wearing the jumper most guys who worked at the plants near there wore. For some reason I immediately got a really bad feeling, panicked, and turned around and went to the nearest other section. Took a few minutes to calm down enough to realize that it was the baby section and that I was staring at an infant bouncer for which I had no use. I laughed at myself, put it down to how anxious and socially awkward I was, and then turned around to go back to the shoe section. I then realized that guy was now in the baby section and that bad feeling came back. What were the odds he actually needed something there? I fled to the women's clothing section, thinking that there was no reason he would appear there. I was shaking, pretending to look at things and telling myself that I was being ridiculous, when he came up behind me and grabbed my behind so hard his fingers got places I wish they hadn't and whispered something in my ear. He immediately walked away, before I could do anything. I listen to those bad feelings now. Frankly, I consider myself extremely lucky. I also really wish I could remember what he said, but everything was kind of roaring and went blurry. I was so panicked.
Walmart has the worst creeps. My little cousin and I got followed by a man around the store. I was 16, she was 13. I took 4 left turns around the store after I noticed he was tailing us to find out he was following. Luckily a man at one of the checkout lines stopped him and started talking to him long enough for us to leave. Really sorry that happened to you. I was walking to the train station at 9 p.m. in a very isolated area. No one was around. 2 men were following me as I'm sure they knew I was going to the train station, and in order to get there, I had to go through a dark alley. They were 2 huge men and I was shorter and also a minor, which was obvious cause I had a backpack. They started trying to corner me and then they asked questions about where I live and if I live in the area, and then a big family came and the men left.
In 5th grade, after ballet practice, I was only wearing shorts and a jacket over my dance clothes, leotard and tights, and standing in a Chipotle line. Some old dude was behind me and asking me about my phone. According to my mother, he was looking at my body, scanning it up and down. Even before I found that out, he gave me the creeps. When we left, he rushed to pick up his order and ran out the door after us and followed us home. He stopped following at the last turn. I had trouble sleeping.
I talked to him for 2 minutes at a welcome icebreaker game when university first started. A few months later, I decided to not go to university anymore and to move in with my parents. I had not seen him since the game. He contacted not me but the priest of our village. He told him I had a special aura, and he needed me around. He drove 2 hours to say that to my priest. Thank God the priest did not like that and called me and offered to call the cops. It still haunts me how much he must have found of me online, researched to know where I live and that I was religious. I definitely did not tell him that. Really weird.
Have a creepy old neighbor 70 plus who calls me pet names and looks through my windows as well as pinning letters to my door. Smiley face.
Those have reported to the police. Actions.
Lived in a super cheap, super pooty apartment when I was in college. It was a decent city, but the apartment was located in the only bad neighborhood. I was willing to deal with it for $300 per month rent. Because of the price, people constantly moved in and then bailed after a month or 2. One of these people was an older, 50s to 60s, veteran. He seemed polite at first, but after he had been there a few days I'd catch him weirdly leaning to watch me from behind a wall when I'd be outside. When my boyfriend wasn't around, he'd wait for me to be outside and then run up to start a conversation. The conversations were usually harmless at first, then would get creepy, like asking what my favorite sex position is and other inappropriate questions. About 2 months in, I was leaving my house at like 10 p.m. and I saw him stumbling around the parking lot covered in blood. I quickly left, and never saw him again. However, a few days later my landlord knocked on my door and was pale in the face. He asked me if I had seen anything unusual with the guy. I explained that I had, and asked why. He said that if I ever see him on the property again, I need to call the cops first and then call him. It took some prying to find out why, and he told me that he just went in to clean out his apartment and all that the guy had in his house was a dirty mattress, a broken toaster, and a full-on sex dungeon. I don't know what all that entailed, but he mentioned the place was full of bondage and restraint type things. It still makes my skin crawl to think about it. As teenagers, we, 3 females, were walking to the local park when a middle-aged man started following us. We made it to the park and he came in and actually started swinging, glancing our way occasionally. After a few minutes we decided we felt too weird and left. He got up and started following us again, so we ran. Found a police officer and told him and gave him a description of the man. It's impossible to tell if he just was maybe a mentally challenged man who didn't know how to talk to people, or if he actually was a pedo, but we didn't want to find out. It was a tiny town, half-mile-long town center, and we weren't aware of any mentally challenged guys that hung around the area despite being pretty well aware of all the known faces in our town.
Typical guy wouldn't take no as the answer. He was part of the church group I was with at the time. Asked me out, I said no. Asked me out again, no. Then he started showing up on my college campus just randomly. He didn't go there, so I informed campus police. Then he began showing up at the places my college group hung out at. Some of my bigger guy friends told him to get lost. Then he started showing up where I worked. So some of my friends started hanging out with me at work. He then began showing up randomly at my house. So I called the police and took out a restraining order against him. Luckily it worked. That said, I am a much different person now than I was in college. Now it would have stopped at the second no and gone not one bit further. This dude was catcalling me. He then approached and licked my ear.
Had quite a few bad experiences, but one was when I was walking on the road with a friend. Two guys came on bikes, slapped my ass very hard, it really hurt, and fled the scene. I was only 15. I was so shocked and screamed loudly and everyone stared at me. It was so embarrassing, I cried for days. Edit. To the creep that sent me a personal message saying I couldn't handle the neutron style, yes, I couldn't. I don't often share my experiences as I think people may not believe or care, but some kind people of Reddit genuinely seem to care. Stop sending me horrible PMS.
When I was 17, a man who looked to be about in his 30s followed me around a Macy's when I was shopping with my aunt. I did notice him at first because he made eye contact with me a couple of times but thought nothing of it. After about 30 minutes he was still lurking around, but, again, I just thought it was in my head. My aunt went to check out and I was browsing around when suddenly the man appeared out of nowhere, handed me a note, and walked away. He wrote that he couldn't stop looking me and all this other pathetic garbage. At the end he left his phone number and said he hoped I called him. I remember being so creeped out that this man stalked me and then wanted someone so young to contact him. I did not contact him. I never want to feel like prey again.
I was walking with my children on a secluded river walk. I noticed that we were being followed at a distance. I figured this individual may just be enjoy the same path I was. We stepped off the trail onto a scenic deck off the path that overlooked the river. I was showing the girls the ducks and different types of trees. We hung out there for about 20 minutes. However, I noticed the person behind us on the path did not reach us in that time. At that moment, I heard a stick snap off in the woods close to us. I then saw this man hiding behind large shrubs, thinking he was unable to be seen. This man had been watching my children and I for the entire time we had been stopped. He was getting closer, unaware that I could see him. It became apparent to me that we were in danger. I told the older child to grab the stroller and run to closest public area, to yell for help, to call 911. I then confronted the man as he came barreling out of the woods. He realized he had been spotted.
Thank you for watching. We upload new videos every day, so be sure to come back for more fun. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video.